Hello and welcome everyone to our latest podcast. I am Nick Drewe, co-founder and director here at Market Dojo. So this was going to be a webinar, but the team decided that I have a face for the radio. And so in today's podcast, we should be discussing a recent trend amongst enterprise procurement teams who are increasingly using a network of best-of-breed solutions, as opposed to solely considering a single suite provider. So joining me today in this discussion is Jordan Jansen, a board-level procurement expert who's also has a great deal of experience of different procurement tools, typically as the end customer, both suite and best of breed. I'll let Jordan introduce himself.
Thank you, Nick, for the introduction. Pleasure to speak with you today from across the pond and the opportunity to discuss best of breed procurement solutions. A little bit about myself. I'm a 30-year procurement strategic sourcing professional. I started when I was 11, so I'm not that old. I've had the privilege to work across multiple industries in procurement, strategic sourcing, supply chain organizations, in aerospace, technology, consumer electronics, financial services, real estate. So my background has been very broad in working within organizations that have been small to Fortune 50 companies, small procurement organizations from 6 to a dozen to well over hundreds of people. My first introduction to running ERFX platforms was back in 2006. I don't know if you've heard of the little product called Xbox, but our organization was the first to deploy the ERFX tool there, e-auction specifically on cables and connectors, and it was a wild success with regard to the cost savings that we were able to drive out of that, and it sort of was the genesis of my understanding and use of ERFX platforms. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today and look forward to having the conversation.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, Jordan. And yeah, Xbox, excellent. What a good project to work on, I'm sure. So let's kick off then with some simple definitions, as I think there are some blurred lines sometimes between best of breed and suite, in that one person might consider a solution to be a suite, yet that very same suite might consider themselves to be best of breed, compared to an ERP, for example. Now, a quick search on Google, as we all do, came up with a definition of the animal in a show judged to be the best representative of its breed, which wasn't particularly helpful. So Jordan, you're someone who's invested in a number of different procurement solutions. How would you define a best of breed provider versus a suite?
That's interesting that you use the Google definition, but I actually think it might be helpful here. With regard to that, I look at, let's say, a canine or a dog as a platform, and Husky or a German Shepherd as a breed. I think what you hear today from a lot of technology providers is that they're claiming to be best of breed with their platform, i.e. the dog, but as an end user, I want to see that every module is best of breed. So all the functionality within there, I want to know whether that I'm getting a Husky or, the smaller German Shepherd to be fit for purpose, to enable the organization to utilize the functionality of that tool that provides the best analytics and insight to the specific needs that the organization is trying to drive. Oftentimes, the platform approach, you get good functionality for certain aspects or certain groups, but it falls short with regard to some of the activity that you're really trying to drive. So the difference between spend analytics or ERFX or e-auction, the platform provider, while they're saying they're best of breed, really haven't addressed the functionality and the solutions within each module.
Very good. Fantastic work there on dovetailing my abstract Google search into your answer. That's extra bonus
points. Yeah, you
points
threw
for
me
that.
a curveball on that one, Nick.
I sure did. I hope everyone's not now searching for husky procurement solutions. They might be a little bit confused. But I mean, to me, like, best of breed where we operate, a specialist solution, you might know it as, is just a tool set that focuses on a narrow range of end users for specific function, I suppose, that is often just bought standalone. Whereas suites are a sort of combination of software solutions that are pre-packaged and sold as a pack. For example, like Microsoft Office that comes with Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook and so on. And so that led me to do another Google search on this, just to Google search what a suite is defined as, and it comes up as a group of things forming a unit, which makes total sense. That sort of backs up what we're saying. Or a set of matched furniture, which was not quite so applicable. Although, Jordan, with your skills there of running along with my analogies, I'm sure you could come up with something for that too. So let's move on now then from our dictionary corner onto a more familiar ground. I mentioned in my introduction that there's this sort of increasing trend of procurement teams putting their trust into best of breed tools rather than always sticking with the tried and tested suites, the old one throat to choke mentality from IBM. What do you think is fueling this renewed confidence in best of breed, and why now of all times?
Yeah, it's a good question, and a couple parts in there. I think, as a procurement organization and professionals, we've been trained on sort of the one throat to choke mentality. A lot of our efforts are around supply-based rationalization, working, if you're in manufacturing, working with engineering groups to have maybe 2 or 3 strategic vendors. So when you think about procurement tools, you want to eat your own dog food, so to speak, right? Which is, well, a large platform provider that can do all the functionality should be better than having 3 or 4 discrete best of breed companies. And I think this is where the tension starts to rise, because we know, and I think a little bit of understanding with the procurement professionals as engineerings or technical engineers may have the same concern, which is, hey, procurement guys, I need to have multiple suppliers who do the best within the function that they are providing us. So it's a little bit of a interesting inner reflection conversation that a procurement professional needs to do. So with that said, I think we're all aware that the sheer amount of data that's available to organizations has been exponentially increasing. All of our business partners, even our procurement organizations, have access to data that was unimaginable a decade and a half ago, and it's only increasing every year. And the technology solution providers, as I call them, have been taking advantage of this either by building modules of capability on their existing enterprise platforms, or companies are starting which deploy technology solutions to provide a very narrow scope of analytics and insight. So I think, as the sort of the awe of having this data that's coming to life at our fingertips is worn off, when we first got it, it was, wow, this is great. I can see where all the spend is. I can see all the suppliers. I can see pricing. But as you start to take a look at that, you realize that the data isn't always qualified as it should be to enable you to do your job well. I kind of liken it where organizations and end users are starting to look under the hood of the car. We had this great car in the garage, but we weren't sure what's making it run from an enterprise data standpoint. And now that we're starting to understand what our business needs are, the data or the solution set from these large enterprise platforms really aren't helping us solve the problem. And to me, I think it boils down to there's a big difference of technology companies that are providing procurement solutions versus companies with a procurement understanding are providing technology solutions. And I think that's really the genesis of the latter, of companies that are coming from an industry and understand what the industry issues and challenges and opportunities are and building technology solutions for that, are really showing the benefits of what sort of these best of breed approaches are versus the broad platform or one throat to choke mentality.
That's really interesting. I think the data capture in particular and the data flow that you allude to there, we'll come back to that a bit later, but a very, very interesting point around that particular concept. It takes me back to something I remember when sitting with a client once who used to use a large ERP for their e-procurement, and it was clearly designed to do lots of great data capture. There were so many fields in this ERP to create a tender, for example. And for the end user, it just became so onerous for them to use. And that's a real key part of this, is that it's great to have data capture in the big suites and ERPs. But ultimately, if the end user doesn't want to do it because it just becomes far too onerous, the data you get is fairly meaningless. And this particular example, that they used to have a field in there for when creating an ERFX for saying, what is the overall tender value of this ERFX? And people didn't know at this point in time, so they just used to put 0. Fast forward a year down the line, trying to do the reports on, hey, how much value of spend have we taken to market? It was kind of coming up with all these random answers of like, well, this last 6 months you have done £0 or $0 in spend in ERFX, just because the end users did not know and did not want to fill out all this meaningless data from their point of view. So it's a really interesting one, that, and we will come back to it. Yeah, your point around the difference between tech companies offering e-procurement tools versus procurement companies offering technology is a real key one as well, having that sort of understanding and empathy with the function itself. And we at Market Dojo, we certainly put ourselves in that camp of being a procurement company first and foremost, that offers some technology that helps people in the function do their job, or at least we try to. That's certainly what we look to train our team to do. This kind of renewed trust in best of breed starts at home. I think in our personal lives, we all start to use lots of different apps on our phone and what have you, and it doesn't impair our productivity. If anything, I think it makes us more productive, and we're just at home more used to jumping into different apps to do a particular function, whether it's whatever, an app for a train company to book some travel, or an app to leave a review, or jumping into Netflix to watch some films or something. We're kind of used to that way of working at home, and dare I say it, the word millennials, I thought I'd try and avoid saying that, but millennials, as they start entering the function as well, who've brought up on this kind of stuff, are starting to take the reins, and for them it's absolutely no issue to just have an app for doing different functions. That's fine. It brings me on to my next question, which is, what advantages are there by using a best of breed tool compared to using a single suite, or even an ERP? And equally, what do you think are some of the drawbacks, the disadvantages of using best of breed?
Yeah, really good question. I think it ties back into a couple things that you raised there, Nick. One, around just the data and the data integrity, and two, sort of our understanding and our daily life uses of bouncing back and forth between applications. And there's some advantages and disadvantages to the latter that I can talk about. But I think on the advantages from a platform solution, I think should be pretty apparent to most of us by now. As an example, and not to pick on the big name companies, but ERP systems, are amazing, able to glean a bunch of disparate data, but it was designed to support really financial systems and reporting. And those platforms, now that they're ingrained with the systems, it's hard to get off of a large ERP. It's expensive. It takes a lot of resource strain, a lot of internal and third-party technical support. So it's almost like a virus. Once they're attached to you, you kind of are a captive audience for what's next with them. For instance, just a very simple thing from a procurement standpoint, categorization of spend to FP&A, financial planning and analysis organization, can be completely different than how procurement organization or business lines that may be doing procurement take spend to market. An ERP system may be collating categories of spend that are completely disparate on how we would do, from a procurement standpoint, a go-to-market activity. So that data isn't really fit for purpose for us to take it to market. So if a platform provider is now building ERFX or spend analytics based on the category hierarchy that they have from an FP&A standpoint, it doesn't help me as an end user and allow me to do my job quicker or faster, or provide me any additional insight that I can bring as a competitive advantage to the business units I'm supporting. I think one of the technology solutions built for procurement versus procurement orientated firms building technology solutions, these modules, having this sort of best of breed tool really allows you to address the appropriate areas of work that you need to do to do your job, your spend management, your contract deal flow, your ERFX, inclusive of e-auction platforms. And then the follow on, which is your pipeline and savings tracking, allows you to deploy these, which you alluded to, your home apps, these applications, to solve those specific business needs versus having one type of app solution that does maybe one thing well, and the others you're having to do a lot of extra steps just to be able to utilize the functionality. I think one of the disadvantages, though, when you use the millennial home application is really I think this is what the industry, that's either through strategic alliances or best of breed acquisitions, is really all of these various components that are providing meaningful analytics, insight, and execution. I think the challenge still remains is how you tie all of that reporting together from a procurement standpoint to have a seamless dashboard, as I would call it, versus having to pull results from these disparate best of breed systems in and then melding those together for reporting to the broader business. I think that's one of the challenges that I still see that's out there. But at least from my standpoint, I would rather do that work at the back end of reporting versus having to do the front end work of data cleansing, utilizing functionality or solutions that really don't help me do my job, because if they don't, I'm going back to the old archaic way of Excel, RFP, and a cloud of dust versus utilizing the technology and what it's been meant for.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's that interesting trade-off between that, the usability and adoption versus the brilliant data capture that these bigger suites can do, but at the trade-off of that user experience and adoption. And it's really good that actually you brought up reporting there. I mean, since you mentioned it, let's focus in on that, because it's something that we at Market Dojo have been really trying to tackle head on as well by doing things like providing automatic data feeds into independent business intelligence tools, like Microsoft Power BI or Tableau and things like that. I guess by consequence, introducing another best of breed application into the mix. But this all means that the data can be unified, even if they're all in different solutions. So not just our, say, contract management or sourcing events or supplier onboarding data, but clients are also using it to pass in data from their spend repository, or their invoicing, or even supplier performance, and perhaps even sales data. So procurement teams can now sort of consolidate like spend versus sales versus supplier performance and sourcing events and so on, which is really powerful just by using something like Power BI. And so we're seeing some of our clients now are getting pretty advanced, creating these minority report kind of cockpits for their entire procurement function, which tends to be so much better and more enriched data than the reports that you get even from an integrated suite with their, let's say, not so best of breed reporting capabilities within them. So yeah, it's a really interesting point you mentioned that. And so yeah, along a similar line, Jordan, in your experience, what would you say to someone that has concerns like over using a best of breed tool, or perhaps someone who might only consider a suite for their needs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not only just a best of breed procurement solution tool, but as procurement strategic sourcing professionals, any entrant into the market that's of a smaller size, right? You're always going to have concerns around, you associate best of breed with small. Now that isn't always the case, but it's typically, you're going to be a smaller size company than an enterprise type of platform, the big companies that are out there. So I think, some of the challenges that you look at, are they a new entrant into the market? You have to assess whether, the claims of best of breed, you have to be savvy enough yourself to put the right assessment criteria around what truly is best of breed. And I think that comes down to defining what you're trying to solve for with your procurement tool solutions, and really having an open assessment of the functionality of a large platform modular solution versus the best of breed approach. And I think you always have to look at the financial health of the company. A lot of the upstart best of breed companies are trying to execute to their strategic business plan. They may be, early entrants and seed, then cap, early investment money that they have to be executing to their strategic sales plan. And if there's hiccups along the way, you're concerned that you may be left high and dry after you've spent the time, resources, and money deploying the solution, but also changing your internal business processes. So while a little bit different, I think there's a lot of the same assessment, whether you're bringing on a new component supplier, a new professional corporate services vendor. You need to run through the same assessment type criteria as you do with those as well.
Very fair. I think we've had to undergo all of those kind of assessments as well when looking to work with prospective clients. And so, as a consumer of this service, how might you protect yourself from these concerns? What kind of things can you put in place?
Well, protecting yourself is a broad question. It is technology, so a lot of the things your technology partner internally may ask you about is, do we have code and escrow? I don't think, in my perspective, I don't think that's really necessary because we're not customizing platforms. I would argue that a lot of the internal data from RFPs, if I've never had an organization that had a procurement tool or solution, I have disparate data all over. It's sitting on various laptops, various servers, maybe on SharePoint. To the organizations that have matured, you might even have a center of excellence repository that the data is there and being backed up. But I think, as you run the spectrum of maturation of procurement organization, that data is going to be all over anyway. So I think you just have to assess where you are in your current state, what the solution that you're bringing into the company is going to be solving for, and assess the risk criteria of what you need to protect for. Is it code? Possibly, probably not a high probability, but more of the data backup. Where's the data coming from? How's the data being reported back to you? How are the specific, in your case, the e-auctions being run, the RFPs, the RFI, the vendor contact information? How do you get that downloaded into a repository that if the company did go out of business the next day, that at least you have a good fundamental baseline either to continue to build from, or you use that data as part of your improving your, what I would call SOW and SLAs to the next provider that you bring in to make sure that they can match the type of solution that you deployed prior.
Absolutely, makes sense. I mean, I'm still surprised sometimes. We recently talked to a customer that had a sourcing tool in place, and they'd had tens of thousands of sourcing events in there. And we offered to look at migrating the data over, and they just said, "Don't worry about it. We're just going to switch it off," and that's that. Quite amazing, really. That's the little value that they saw in that kind of legacy data. Maybe it's not all that important for everybody. Something we often mention to clients is that we're very easy to implement in many cases. There's almost no onboarding costs. I mean, as you know well, Jordan, from your experience, but
Right.
with our kind of pay-as-you-go pricing as well, it's almost like taking some of that risk off the table completely in a way. So, especially compared to something like an example I read recently in the press with Lidl, the global German retailer who looked to implement a very well-known and respected ERP. The name is online if you ever Googled this article. And they
Right.
invested something like 500 million euros into this ERP rollout before they just completely pulled the plug on it and thought this isn't working for us. So there are
Right.
definitely some more expensive mistakes to make than giving a go with a best of breed solution for sure. And that
Right.
actually brings up another point that we can discuss, which is the product roadmap and the depth of the product set that you get with best of breed. Like, have you ever experienced, or do you have any thoughts about how they can sort of keep up with your demands as your own functional maturity develops and your own requirements become more complex?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue, at least within my experience, the best of breed companies are more nimble, and they may be more nimble because they're more hungry. They're looking to oftentimes, you know, continue to build their footprint in the marketplace. But with their understanding, they tend to be more passionate about the specific technology that they're deploying. For instance, a large enterprise platform, now you are on their roadmap of product development and enhancement, and that may be 6 to 12 months down the road when the next revision. They may be great at listening and taking your feedback with regard to, hey, I would like to be able to do English or Japanese auctions, for instance. Well, we have that on our roadmap. We heard from our clients, but it's not going to be for 16 months versus a smaller best of breed may say, hey, we're nimble and we can do that within 3 months. We're going to move that up because we heard our customer base is interested in that. So I think that the best of breed companies, in a general sense, tend to be more nimble in their ability to customize their platform. And I'm not saying that that's free, but willing to work with you especially if you're a early adopter. And I think that gives you a little bit of street cred with the best of breed companies. And if you really have that connection with them from for instance, your company, your founders have come out of the procurement industry. You know the talk, you know the complexities, you know the challenges of procurement organizations, and when you can have those fundamental baseline conversations and overlay technology on it, the solution sets seem to be able to mature and move quicker than technology solution sets that are sort of being forced down on the organization.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I mean, that's something we often see is that we kind of almost mature with our clients. So we both start off fairly on the basic side and start to get more sort of advanced and sort of intelligent in how we're doing things in parallel, which is quite interesting. And I suppose it's the trick of how we keep this going, because I guess once upon a time, even Oracle and SAP were small, nimble solutions.
Right, right, right,
Compared to where they are today. So it's interesting how best of breed tools can continue to be best of breed and not get too sort of engrossed in building out the depth and breadth, I suppose, of their solutions until they are just another suite provider. And for us, this is really where our kind of customer love roadmap comes in. It's a permanent development item on our roadmap, with at least 2 developers full time working on that, taking in all the requests across our different clients and putting them into an online sort of prioritization and into a sort of 2-week
right,
sprint for the team to immediately start working on and then release to the wild 2 weeks later. to ensure we're always trying to keep on top with our customers and the requests that keep coming. And certainly this agility does have that kind of advantage compared to some of the big beasts out there. And as you say, like a 16-month kind of wait time on something relatively simple versus, right, guys, let's start in 2 weeks time and get it done in 4 weeks. And that's certainly what best of breed look to offer.
I would also add, Nick, that interesting what the future, sort of the authenticity of best of breed. As a company like yourself, as it matures, you are getting feedback from opportunities just like years ago the big platform providers are from your customers, which is, hey, we love the ERFX platform, but what can you do in contract lifecycle management, vendor onboarding, project savings tracker, right? And those are all revenue opportunities that a company has to decide, are we going to go after because it's easy, or are we going to be able to go after with the same type of expertise and solution set that we did from our core best of breed platform, to make sure that the maturity of best of breed all of a sudden doesn't become a big platform dinosaur as well. It'll be interesting what the best of breed providers do in the next 3, 5, 10 years here.
You're absolutely right. And, for us, indeed, it's so hard to say no to a revenue opportunity. But we have to take that evaluation to think, okay, this does take us slightly off the beaten track with our own roadmap vision. Is this something that's going to benefit the wider community, or are we building something that's too niche, too customer specific for our own good? And sadly, there have been times where we've had to kind of put things on the back burner, but I'm pleased to sort of say that the majority of things we've been able to collaborate with clients on, and those that we have turned down, well, we've come up with some alternative suggestions, which I guess harks back to your comment at the start around being a procurement-led technology company rather than a technology-led, procurement solution, in that we put our procurement hats on and we think, look, guys, I can see what you're trying to do there, but how about you do it this way instead? And then you don't need all that software development. You can get your overall objective met. So we do try and push back and challenge constructively where necessary.
Right.
Which actually takes on next kind of point here, which is customer service. Because I was interested to hear from you around if you've seen any noticeable differences between customer service from best of breed solutions versus customer service that you've had from suites. What's been your experience there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think customer service really comes down, still at the end of the day, to the individual that's assigned to your account and how well they understand your needs, how well they're able to articulate it back into their organization and provide solutions back to you. In a broader sense, larger companies, enterprise platforms, they have more people, they have a bigger structure. Your access to key movers within those vendors, I would say, organization may not always be there for the end user. You may have the C2C level activity, but when you want things to change, you don't always have the ability to go to the CPO, CFO, CTO to have that peer conversation to help move things along. You're relying on your account executive to be working with your strategic sourcing group, your directors, to really understand what the challenges are that they're facing and how they might be solved. That is not, bigger companies can overcome that. It's just a harder network to work through. I think the smaller companies, the advantage there, you have more direct line of sight to the C-level of those companies. They're not as big. They're, the like yourself, the founders of the companies have their finger on the pulse of the business, and they're more involved in sort of the day-to-day activity and feedback from their client base than larger companies are. So I think you do get some better customer service from a best of breed, but it really comes down to, in my opinion, Nick, you can have bad customer service, a best of breed, because the people within the organization structure that are supporting you may not be fit for purpose. They may not understand your needs. They may be looking at, how do I get the next sales logo up on the board versus, hey, if we can fix this client's issue on how to do vendor scoring, or out of the ERFX, out of the auction platform, how to do vendor awards better, or in a different way, that can help to solve 10 other customer problems or future sales engagement. So a little bit of an advantage with the smaller companies of direct line of sight to the higher level peer organizations, but at the end of the day, I think it still comes down to who's in that chair, looking after myself and the organization as a client, and the feedback of the needs that we have.
Very fair. Yeah, I suppose we're all individuals at the end of the day, and we like to think that things like the company culture will sort of cascade across everyone to do things like put the customer first. But yeah, I completely get that, because in our parallel, I suppose something that we kind of experience is that because we are very specialist in certain areas, for example, e-auctions, any of our team have seen hundreds of auctions, almost on a monthly basis. And so if someone calls up with a query about an auction, they've got so much sort of specialist experience of that particular solution, that function, that they can provide some really good kind of practical advice, benchmarking, whatever it might be. Whereas perhaps with some of these suite providers, you're going to a generic help desk, which could range from anything
Right.
with like help on, I don't know, raising an invoice or a purchase order, or producing a report, or maybe running an auction. And so you've got these, more generic kind of help and guidance. And I think especially on the supplier side, that gets compounded, because I've heard stories of how ERP solutions don't really give any help or support to suppliers during auctions, for example, because quite frankly their support team doesn't need to deal with that nitty-gritty day-to-day stuff.
Right.
So it falls upon the purchasing organization, the consumer of the tool, to provide all that help to suppliers. And that, you don't want to be doing that. That's not your particular area of expertise or value add. You want to throw that over to your solution provider, and certainly I think that's where sort of best of breed can give that help, because we love helping out suppliers, because it gives us the feedback on where we can be better, and take that burden away from our sort of the purchasing community. So yeah,
You raise a good point there. In my experience and watching organizations that have utilized large enterprise platforms, and specifically around e-auction versus best of breed, you want your procurement individuals, whether they're category managers, buyers, strategic sourcing, whatever the nomenclature is, who are running that event, you want them to be the quarterback of the event. And what I mean by that is they're calling the plays. That they're really doing what they would do in a conference room or on a face-to-face meeting. They're running a negotiation, and part of that is how they're messaging, how they are looking at how the data is coming in, where they have input from their business partners who really have, a preference of suppliers that they want it to go to. So they need to be quarterbacking all of that. And around, the topic of customer service, when you have to take them away and to start dealing with, hey, I can't get access, I can't bid, I have a technical issue, and those suppliers aren't pointed to where I've seen best of breeds, they are getting all the technical help in the background because that's where they're directed to. On the larger platforms, your point's absolutely right. You're going into, and we all hate this, the call center, the help center that has a call tree, that if your question falls in line as a supplier as part of the call tree, great. But if it deviates, one little step, everything falls apart. So that your point is absolutely spot on.
Oh, that's good to hear, and certainly I feel sorry for the people on the end of that, raising that support ticket during an auction and getting that generic response going, "Thank you, your ticket has been created. We will get back to you in 48 hours." And like, no,
Right.
that's too late. Absolutely, and I mean, one people say that with suites and ERPs, you've got that kind of consistent user experience across all modules, which is designed to kind of help with that mitigating issues of unfamiliarity and having to raise sort of technical help questions with the team. But what's interesting, we for one of our clients, Interserve, we integrated our solutions with Parangusta, whom you know well from your time at Savers,
Mm-hmm.
and the end users didn't even realize that there were separate modules, like separate companies. They just felt like the whole thing kind of flowed as one. So yeah, it's
Right.
interesting that sometimes even using best of breed tools plugged together, it gives that kind of it can give even a seamless user experience. So they all just think they're dealing with one company, and all the customer service and everything is near identical as well, because as you say, best of breed
Right.
tools can be a bit more nimble and eager to please. And so that was quite interesting to see that yeah, people didn't even know that we were a different solution.
Sure.
So yeah, talking of what we've covered so far, hopefully we've convinced a few people out there that okay, best of breed tools are worth having a look. But the question then comes to mind of, well, where do you look? How do you actually find these best of breed tools? Because we've talked about they're quite niche sometimes, maybe too niche for the likes of Gartner or Forrester, who tend to focus
Right.
on the bigger suites, and they're probably too small maybe to get on the first page of Google when you're searching for things. So like, where do procurement people start when they want to try and find these best of breed tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I may be dating myself with my age, but when we took a look at, actually, when we came across Market Dojo back in, 2012, 2013, the traditional way of how you went out and got your Gartner, Forrester reports and found your upper right-hand quadrant. Social media, forums, organizations have changed all of that. I think, one of the challenges you said is, how does the best of breed even get on, their SEO, search engine optimization, so they're coming up when you type in ERFX platform or e-auction. I think from a best of breed approach, the procurement forums, the networks that are out there, just a webinar like this, the sharing of information, we talked about data, has exponentially increased as well too. So there's so many different mediums, venues where that information can be found. I'm seeing procurement professionals and organizations, you use the dreaded millennial word, they have unique ways of how they're finding companies to bring to the forefront. So it's technology is helping in that way as well, with regard to a decade or more ago of how we looked at potential vendors that could come to play in a specific solution set that you're looking for. And I think it's going to continue to evolve, and there's going to be unique ways that platforms such as yourself and others are going to reach their end target market and customers.
Very good. Yeah, it is interesting, and you're right. It has evolved a lot, even since the 10 years that we've been going. It's evolved a lot from being maybe more the sort of telemarketing approach initially, to then content marketing came all the rage, and suddenly white papers were everywhere you could possibly go, and then now LinkedIn is all the rage. And that's becoming
Mm-hmm.
saturated. Every day we get dozens of contact requests. So it is quite tricky. But if anyone out there does know where all the procurement professionals hang out, I mean, we'd sure love to know. That's a given. And talking about procurement professionals, what advice can you offer to someone to help them decide whether a best of breed tool might be more suitable for them versus a suite? And that could even touch on any advice you can share on evaluating such solutions, if you like.
Yeah, I think from a procurement organization, you always have the challenge of selling your worth internally with the company, and that's a broad answer, right? Which is, I think, on a whole, procurement organizations, are all about cost savings in the general sense, and looked at as being policy police and questionable on the savings that they're actually putting up on the table. Do they really have P&L impact? So with that, it sort of starts at, well, now procurement's coming and they want tools to do their job better. And if there's already a negative connotation about what the value add that they can bring to the organization, it's often an uphill battle. And I sort of led with that, I guess, Nick, because you need to be able to articulate internally what value you're bringing to the organization, and that is either, whether it's finance, your business partners, so that then you can define what you need to do your job. And when you do that, the tool suites that you are putting out, whether it's spend analytics, contract management, e-auction, ERFX, savings and pipeline tracking, all of that, now you're going to be able to articulate to the vendor base in a clearer manner versus, hey, I want spend analytics. I want an ERFX platform. Well, what are you really trying to solve for? What are the challenges that you have? Do you have good data streams? Do you have good data category, hierarchy, categorization, etc.? So, from a procurement professional standpoint, then if you're able to answer the internal question and that value, I think you're going to be able to define exactly what you need externally. And then you're going to be able to bucket, sort of in our traditional matrix approach, is what are the best of breed and what are the Uber platform providers, and assess the criteria of each. It's no different than when you're looking to consolidate a BOM and you have a whole, 10 different suppliers, each providing a different component, but you also have 4 suppliers that can do 6 or 7 of those components. You're just not sure if they're going to be the best components when they provide component 3, 4, and 5, so to speak, right? So you have to really define what it is to be good enough and exceptional, and put those attributes out for the various best of breed platform functionality. Not necessarily the best of breed, but the functionality that you're looking for as part of the solutions, the analytics and the insight, to determine whether a one-stop shop is good enough, or whether it really does allow you to look at 2, 3, or 4 different best of breed providers to provide the whole suite of solutions that you've defined that are going to help you then show that value add back to the organization or to the business partners that you're collaborating with.
Okay, I mean, very, very interesting. Is that maybe off on a slight tangent here from what you've just mentioned? I mean, do you advocate a sort of evolution approach? Just micro steps to, say, for example, taking an ERFX because that became the area that the business identified as being a particular weakness, and then moving on to spend analysis after, say, 6 months. So taking that sort of gradual approach. Or when you're fresh into a procurement organization and leading that organization, do you more advocate a sort of revolution approach to say, right, let's tear this all up, let's start again, and let's go look at the entire 3-year or 5-year roadmap and try and solve it all nice and quickly with a sort of big rollout of all these different solutions in one go, which may be the best of breed components plugged together, or maybe just the one suite that can do everything. Where do you kind of lean on that, and why?
I think you first have to, as procurement organizations, you have to assess where you are, and it's an overused word of transformation. If there is an internal mandate, what does that really mean? And I look at transformation being more just maturity of an organization, and not necessarily maturity all the time, but what's driving the company. Our market conditions have slowed sales, and now they really need to be looking at cost reduction because the ratios are off. So you really need to take a look at where you are in the maturity of the organization and what you want to solve for. With that, then I think you then need to take a look at your organization's capability and assess what they're going to be able to run as part of the strategy playbook that you put in place. You may only have an organization that's capable of moving from RFP, closed bid, face-to-face negotiations to e-auction. That's all they could bite off, versus other organizations that may have gone through a few life cycles of technology and are able now to quickly adopt a more holistic approach in the 3 years. So you want to move all the pieces of that solution set together. You can do contract lifecycle management, you can do spend analytics, and you can do ERFX platforms all at the same time, because you have the capability to understand how they're all knitted together and how they work independently of each other, and how you can utilize all that data and all that analytics and insight and reporting to further improve the value of the procurement organization, but more importantly, how you're satisfying some of the initiatives and imperatives that have been laid out for the organization to solve and to provide back to the organization.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jordan. That makes complete sense. Yeah. And so, yeah, moving on to deployment then of the solutions. From your experience, Jordan, can best of breed technology be implemented faster than a suite rollout, or are there any particular nuances or pitfalls that you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's out of my wheelhouse a little bit. I think it's a little bit of an apple and an orange. An enterprise platform tends to have a lot more data repositories that it's hooking into. So the timeline for implementation and integration is traditionally longer. And, comparative of an apple to apple, for a company like yourself, it's much easier to deploy. You could be up and running with an e-auction platform within weeks versus waiting for an e-auction module that's hanging off an ERP system. So it's a little bit different comparative, but just from a very fundamental notional sense, best of breed platforms, in my experience, have been much easier to integrate and implement, just because of the compartmentalized touch points that they have within the organization.
Okay, that's good. That's good to hear. And yeah, weeks to implement our e-auction. We've had genuinely people who have called us up in the morning and said, right, we've never used your service before, but we want an auction in the afternoon, and let's make it happen. And you bet that can happen, but
Right.
maybe weeks is
Right.
towards the slow end of the scale, perhaps. But very good. And we have to come down to cost. We are procurement professionals after all. Have you noticed any kind of differences in the sort of total cost of ownership, or the cost models of best of breed versus full suites? In regards to things like the licensing costs or the deployment costs, the ongoing customer success and customer service. Have you sort of seen any sort of particular salient points from those?
So yes, I think you absolutely see a cost difference with regard to smaller best of breed approaches. I think there's more nimbleness in their licensing structure, whether it's by event for smaller organizations, or the ability to have larger organizations. The seat cost is typically cheaper. Where I think a real pricing differential is in the implementation cost versus larger platform solutions, just because it's the overhead associated with a platform, an enterprise solution versus a best of breed approach is so much more. And I think the third element of that is really the ongoing professional services / customization. Most of the best of breed providers, yours inclusive, have been willing to work within the budget constraints that a procurement organization has at the time, versus some fairly hefty customization fees that you might have at a larger enterprise level.
I see. I mean, yeah, certainly, with us working with procurement professionals who might be evaluating our solution, they can be quite canny, as is part of the role around the cost comparisons. We'll kind of put forward our licensing cost, which is for us an all-inclusive, fully laden cost. And we might be told, oh, your licensing is a bit more expensive than the solution we have already, and so might cannily sort of forget to mention the service fee that might be there, the maintenance fee that might be there, the cost of any developments that might be there with their existing solution, and just try and compare only on that license element, which is
Right.
can't hold it against anyone, but I've heard some other bizarre models in the more enterprise solution space of I think it was a contracts management module that a client was using with an enterprise suite, and the fee for using the module related to, I think it was something like 1% of the contract value that was being stored in the tool. And yeah, you're talking some big enterprises sometimes with contracts
That
worth tens of millions of dollars, and it's like, hold on a sec, we're paying 1% just to store this contract that's worth $10 million, just to sit there on your tool. I'm not sure that sounds like a fair value there. So
I'd like to be the holder of that contract, that's for sure.
yeah, wouldn't you just? Yeah, uh, absolutely. And let's move on to talent then. I mean, we're just coming to the end of the podcast now, and this is perhaps one of the less considered factors, in that, do you find, Jordan, that best of breed tools, and they might be able to sort of affect the talent that a procurement team can attract and ideally retain as well, and dare I say it again, that word, I think we both mentioned it a few times, the millennials. It does an enterprise that is using a best of breed application, does that help attract these kind of people to the function and to the company, compared to having to be presented with a bit of a beast of a suite or an enterprise
Right.
solution?
Well, I think if we agree that best of breed means the usability of that solution is best of breed in terms of its functionality, I think it absolutely not only can help attract talent, but it also helps retain talent, because wherever you are in your procurement learning, whether you're fresh out of school, out of university, whether you've come from a smaller organization and now you are moving up in your career path and you're being exposed to more processes, methodology, tools, best of breed tools, one, attract you because you have a vision that this company is providing me with the necessary tools to do my job well. And if I can do my job well, then I am looked at as a valuable employee, not only to the company, but I'm gaining learning and insight that I can utilize in my career going forward, whether that's within the company or moving on to another company. I think as part of the internal training, I've seen procurement organizations that flourish when they feel they don't need to have the Cadillac of tools. What they need to have is an understanding of the vision and the strategy of what procurement is doing, what the impact that they can have that is tangible and appropriately measured, so they have line of sight, and then they're given the tools to do their job, and that's where the best of breed tools come in. And if they can see that the solutions that they have, and let's just take Market Dojo for instance, can allow them to put more wins on the board, get more throughput on ERFPs through an e-auction tool, they're going to see that they're being invested in, they're being supported, and in return, they can give back to the company and to the organization that they feel is value add and part of the broader organization.
Absolutely. Well, very interesting, because I mean, something that we kind of find in this area that we try and help sort of support our clients with keeping that talent is after every, well, the first time a user runs an auction or runs a successful sourcing event, we send them a personalized, like, little Lego character, or should I say a plastic model character, to kind of help them remember and recognize that success that they've had, put it on their desk and kind of think back to it. And I hope that, in a very small way, kind of helps drive that kind of satisfaction with using a tool and doing a job well. And I remember actually another client of ours in the US who, they have their own internal trophy. I can't remember what they call it now. It's something like the auction Hulk or something like that, which is like a sort of Incredible Hulk character, like in a
Right.
statuette, that they get to put on the desk of whoever has had the most sort of success that month or quarter in running their online negotiations. So it's these little things that can kind of help bring about that success and that attraction and retention, I suppose. And so, yeah, we're very near the end. I've got one last question that I couldn't resist throwing at you, that isn't necessarily related to suite or best of breed, but something that we get faced with quite often from our clients, which is, what best practice advice can you offer to procurement teams when it comes to getting e-sourcing tools fully adopted in their function? And would you mandate it? The carrot versus stick approach there.
Well, it really starts with, if you have the ability to bring a tool in, look for the best tool. And here's the sales pitch to you. I've found that Market Dojo is definitely one of those best of breed tools, just from usability, accessibility, functionality standpoint. So if you do have budget to do it, I think it's not really a mandate. You're giving an organization what you believe is a tool that's going to help them do the job. And part of you don't know how to use the tool of anything that you're given, you want to be able to incentivize them. So how do you do that? Well, part of your performance, you need to run 5 events over the next 6 months or the year. Once you get them, and you need to help them learn the tool, and I think that's part of the best of breed benefits, is those companies like yourself, you're passionate about helping the end user understand the tool, work in the sandbox, look at the functionality. Once the individuals, the category managers, the buyers, the strategic sourcing managers have used the tool, they see the benefits of it, they're going to use it more and more. So, specifically, is it a mandate? I think it is a forced training of the tool. And to me, if the tool and the use of the tool and the solution doesn't sell itself, it's not really best of breed. And a mandate isn't going to change that, because they're, organizations, people within the group, team members are going to see that, one, there's a question with leadership or the company if you're mandating a tool that isn't fit for purpose. But if I see that you've given me a tool to use and the leeway to use the tool, and I see that it's successful, and I'm learning how to apply that tool not only in a very specific commodity or category, but now I'm starting to figure out how to use that tool across multiple categories that may never have been thought to be used by an e-auction, then it becomes pretty powerful. And then you have an internal evangelist who is now able to train other people who are coming on board, espouse the benefits to their broader network internally within the organization, but also externally to their peers. And that's where I think when you hit that rhythm, I think that you've found success, and you've found the success of what a best of breed solution partner and provider can be.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jordan. Great advice there. And I particularly like the fact that you've just come up with a new definition of best of breed. I think you said if it doesn't sell itself, it's not best of breed. So there you go. The definition of best of breed now is something that sells itself, or maybe a software
Well,
solution that
that
sells
that might
itself.
that might be a little more applicable than the best of show at the dog show.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, well, thank you ever so much, Jordan. I think we should probably wrap up now, even though this has flown by. And thank you so much, Jordan, for all of your insight today. It's really appreciated by us here at Market Dojo, and hopefully to all of our listeners as well.
Pleasure to speak with you, Nick. It's been interesting speaking with you on the topic, and to have the support of you and your company over, I guess it's coming on close to the past decade. So best of continued success to you guys.
Oh, you are most welcome, and thank you for all your support. I can't believe it's been a decade already. That is quite something. So fantastic. Thank you to everyone who's downloaded this podcast, and please do reach out to us via email at info@marketdojo.com, or you can find both myself and Jordan on LinkedIn, where we'd welcome the chance to connect and hear any of your thoughts. Thank you very much for listening.